So today I want to talk to you about how I make collage paper. And it's a very easy process. I will often just use paper that I've just found, like envelopes or magazines. But I found that the collages look more interesting when I can use some paper that I've painted myself. They start almost to look like abstract paintings. So it's a very straightforward way of how I go about creating this collage paper, but I thought I'd just demonstrate. Just who knows, maybe I'm doing something that's unique and you might feel inspired. So let me show you at the desk some samples of my collage paper, and then I will turn the camera on overhead and I'll just demonstrate how I make some of these papers. The first way that I make collage paper is to use just ink, black ink on white paper. So I have some examples here, and I like making this paper for collage because of the fact that it's high contrast. You may notice or may already know that your eye always moves to the areas in a composition that are the most high contrast. And the idea is to excite your eye as it moves around the composition. And so high contrast is one way that you can do that. So the other reason why I like making these ink on paper marks is just because they are so gestural, and there's just something so relaxing about mark making. It's just almost like knitting because it's so repetitive, and I just find that it really kind of loosens up my hand, and it just gets me ready for a few hours of painting. So these are the marks that I will typically make. Mostly they're just I don't even know what you'd call this, like scribbles maybe. And other times I will take the paper and I will make a grid, a loose grid, and then I'll just fill it in however I decide to fill it in. And it doesn't matter if these compositions are balanced because I'm going to be cutting them up anyway. Yeah, and so this is just basically I'll do stripes. I'll do these kind of scallop shapes. Everyone, I think, will have a different way that they feel comfortable writing. Making marks like this is almost like handwriting, and you can't help but have unique handwriting. So it's just a very almost natural and effortless way to just be comfortable with the way that your hand moves. So that's why I like to make this paper. So this is just one type of paper that I'll make for my collages, and these are all going to be cut up and incorporated into a collage somehow. So these are some examples of painted paper that I'll make. And originally when I was making collages, I would mostly stick with construction paper or craft paper. And I've been leaning more into just using those solid pieces of craft paper just as elements into my collage. And I'm really getting into using the painted paper because I find that the effect overall, the collage almost looks more painterly, and I like to see the brush marks on the surface of a paper. So one way that I'll do it is I will just draw up a loose grid again and then just fill in the squares with whatever shapes I want with whatever paint I have on hand. And this could be leftover paint on my palette, or it could be paint that is on its way out and I just want to use it up. So again, it's another really low stakes way of getting into wetting the brush and just making some marks on the paper. So sometimes I will just take a piece of paper and paint it with a solid color. And then other times I will want to clean my brush off after making a painting. So I'll just kind of randomly make marks. And again, I'm not really thinking about color relationships or composition. I'm just trying to clean my brush. And here's another one, an example of just filling in shapes. And sometimes I will like to get loose edges, and then sometimes I'll use this tool, which is a trim guide. You can find this at a hardware store. It's just a way of, I think it's supposed to be used for painting around the trim, but I find it's really good for making a straight line with the paintbrush. This is another example. These two are both examples of, they're just really me cleaning off my brush after using it. And then some of these pages are quite big, some of them are smaller. I tend to go with thinner papers now because I'm using glue to adhere the collage to a backing paper, and it's sometimes easier to do that with thinner paper. And I have a great roll of this really, really thin paper that for some reason takes up paint beautifully. There's no bleeding on the back. And then this paper, I'll just cut it down however it suits me to incorporate into collages. So in this part of the video, I want to demonstrate how I go about making these ink on paper marks. I'm using black ink here, but I've also used red or green. Really anything that makes a mark will work. Any black ink will do. I do recommend getting a waterproof ink though, because if you are going to be using it for collage and gluing it down, you don't want the dampness of the glue to start smearing the ink. I've made that mistake before. So what I tend to do is I have a few size brushes. So you can see I'm using kind of a medium size, and I've got a smaller size and a bigger size to my right. And the game I play with myself is just to try to use one dip of the ink and make a fluid mark without having to redo my brush stroke. Sometimes if I run out of ink, I will quickly go over that line. Rules are meant to be broken after all. But I find that this way is just very relaxing because there's no pressure to create a masterpiece. You're just having fun with the brush and just getting into really focusing on how the ink is flowing on the page and how the brush is moving in your hand. I think everyone has a very unique way that they control a brush. Everyone's handwriting is distinctive and unique to them, and I don't think you can help but make things how you make things. So this is why it's always puzzled me in terms of looking for an artistic style, because I think everyone already kind of has that to begin with. And sometimes you can get caught up in other artists' work and you want to mimic or emulate what they are making. And it's a good way to learn, but I think you always have this innate way of creating. And this is one practice that you can try just to help fine-tune that style that you just automatically have. So I try just to use a single stroke. I don't like to go over a mark very often. And I'm trying not really to think too hard about what the next move is. The idea is just to get to the end of this little pot of ink that I've poured for myself. And if you want, I encourage you to grab some ink or some paint, some paper, and a couple of brushes and paint along with me, because the idea is just to keep your hand moving and not think too hard about what the next mark is going to be. You can see in the corner of my studio I have a little still life set up, so that is also something that I've been working on lately. So after I've warmed up making repetitive marks, I'll often just try to create a loose composition, and I always start with a grid. And again, I'm trying to not deliberate or think too hard about what I want to do next. I just want to keep the brush moving and use up ink. So I'll make a little grid, and then I'll start to subdivide that grid. And then when things look like they're ready, I'm gonna start just filling in the shapes. I find it's helpful also to hold my brush very loosely and quite high up on the handle. I don't want to have too much control. I like the look of the brush marks, and even the mistakes are fine. This is just collage paper, so I'm gonna be cutting it up anyway, so nothing is really too precious. The great thing about making marks like this is that it's accessible to everyone. Everyone has their own style of handwriting. You can't help it. So when you are making marks without really too much thought about what it needs to look like, you're really tapping into just the natural way that your hand wants to move on a paper. And it's also a good way just to get into the flow of mark making. There's something relaxing about the ink flowing out of the brush, and you're just sort of moving faster than you can really think. And the goal here really is just to fill the page with the marks. I'm not out to make something I want to put in a frame. I'm just trying to use up the material and understand how my brush moves. It's always easy to get into the trap of overthinking, so sometimes you can see my hand hesitate, and I just have to keep moving on and forging ahead. There's other games that you can play with painting on paper. You can limit yourself to 10 strokes. You can play around with the speed of your brush. You can try to move really fast and really slow. There's an endless variety of these painting games. These brushes too are pretty old and beat up. I tend to be pretty rough on my brushes, and I kind of do like that look of the looser effect of a bit of a drier brush on the page. The hardest part is starting, but then once you start, the moves just seem to come one after another. You can really play with the different effects of one brush. You can learn how your brushes work and just play with different techniques of how to hold the brush and how much ink to load it with. And because you're only playing with two values, the most extreme values, black and white, the effect is always impactful because it really highlights the power of line. And these things you just discover them as you play around, and it's just really about play. And I also noticed that there's a difference between making curved lines and straight lines. There's a different energy in the stroke. Let me know in the comments if you like these slower videos. The collage videos that I post weekly, I speed those up at 500% because it does take, around 20 minutes to make a collage. And there's a lot of pauses where I have to think about what the next move is going to be, or sometimes you just need to leave some time for looking. And I would think that would be pretty boring if I didn't speed that up. But if you like these slower style videos, let me know in the comments and I can make some more demos. When I finish marking up a sheet, I just take it behind me and put it on the floor to dry. And by the next day, I'll be able to cut it up and think about how I want to use it. So here I'm using the medium-sized brush, and I've changed the way that I'm holding the brush. I find this will also influence the type of marks that I'll make. I know for me it's helpful to watch videos of artists actually making because it inspires me to get into the studio and paint along with them. There's something about having a body double or a mirror to help get you started. I know it's helpful when you're trying to clear clutter out of your house. I often put those decluttering podcasts on, and it just gives me the energy to go and purge some clothes. And I find that it works the same too with art, that if I am watching someone paint or draw, that it's easier for me to pick up a brush or pick up a pen and just get into that headspace too. So I encourage you, if you want, grab a pencil or some paint and paint along with me. And I'm just painting here on regular photocopy paper. It's nothing expensive or fancy. It just will get the job done. And I've also cut a non-slip mat down, and you can kind of see it's the black shape behind my paper. And I find that it helps keep the paper from slipping around as I am making marks with my brush. And the idea here is to work quickly and not think too hard about what the next move is going to be. Sometimes it's helpful to set a timer if you find that you are prone to kind of slow down and think too hard. Sometimes I'll rotate the paper around just to get a different direction to the marks that I'm making. I try to make each page look different from the page before. So it's a bit like an assembly line. I've got 3 different size brushes and I've got a stack of paper on my left, and I try not to think too hard about what I am going to make. The idea is just to keep my hand moving and to use up the ink that I've poured into the pot. I try to make different marks for each page just to keep it interesting and just to have a different option for when I'm making my collages. So I'm getting to the end of the little pot of ink, so I'm just going to try to finish up the rest of the ink by diluting it with a bit of water, and I'm just going to make a light wash on my last piece of paper. And this is just another way that I clean the brush out without having to waste the material, and I like the effect of this washed out ink. It turns into just all these different types of gray. After doing these ink drawings for a while, you'll really learn to appreciate the way that certain shapes and marks make you feel. And it's a good way of tapping into this unique instinct that everyone has. Sometimes it gets buried by wanting your stuff to look like other people's work, but if you persist and try to make these marks on the paper, you will inevitably determine what is feeling good to you. What I like about this process of making these marks with ink on paper is that you can really discover your own intuitive style of mark making. So that's my paper on the floor, just drying overnight, and it will be ready to incorporate the next day into a collage. So I hope this video will inspire you to grab a paintbrush or a marker and just get into the rhythm of creating marks on paper. I find it very meditative and it's a huge stress reliever. And then at the end of the day, you'll have great material to incorporate into your collage. Thanks for watching. Bye.